All right, welcome everybody. My name's Ros Cardinal from Shaping Change, and I'd love to welcome Robert Kenn, who's joining me today, who's written the author of this wonderful book, Wisdom from the Ocean. And when I picked it up, I was really struck by how easily the lessons translate into leadership. Now, most of us don't spend our days paddling in the surf, much as I'd love to, but I'm in Tasmania and it's just too cold down here. I know there's certainly hardened Tasmanians who are out there every day, but I just couldn't do it. But we all know what it feels like to be dumped by a wave we didn't know was coming. It might be a restructure, a change in direction, a difficult team dynamic. And what you've done in this book is really gather that lived wisdom of people who face uncertainty every day, because you can't negotiate with the waves. You've just got to ride it and meet it head on.
Absolutely.
And the parallels to leadership are really interesting. So we're going to be exploring that as we move forward. So I'm really thrilled to have you here. So thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you, Ros, and it's delightful to be talking to you.
So you, in writing this book, spoke to surfers, which I love the concept of talking to surfers and asking them about, how this translates into life in general. And they're spending the whole time they're out there, they're dealing with very unpredictable conditions. And in leadership, uncertainty really is constant for everybody. I've not met anyone in decades now who says life in leadership is pretty smooth going, everything kind of stays the same. But what did surfers teach you about leading when everything changes faster than you can prepare?
I think the key aspect for that was really particularly how they deal with being in a rip, where they're suddenly just being sucked in the wrong direction, or even if they're just being pounded by waves and constantly pounded. And I mean, I think from a leadership perspective, it's often, in business, we may just have a knee-jerk reaction to, oh, something's gone wrong, so we need to do this and respond. But sometimes it's like, if you're caught in a rip, you actually have to pause for a moment, don't panic, just let the flow take you where you just reassess and go, what are what's quite going on here? What's going to be, do we need to completely change direction? Is this product entirely wrong for our market? Is it just we've got the timing wrong? Do we need to wait a little bit longer? But the surfers have an attitude of don't panic and don't make a sudden change in what you're doing. If you're caught in a rip, just relax for a moment and look around and decide, okay, do I need to change the direction? Do I need to go with the flow? What do I want to do? And give yourself some time just to think before you do the next thing.
I love that. That's really good advice for leadership. I love the concept of just pausing and just taking that sort of pause to go, all right, let's reassess, rather than panicking and trying to fight against it. And I think there's a beautiful lesson in this for leadership around, think of it as dealing with a rip. I actually was listening to a high performance coach who coaches basketball talk about something similar. He talked about be the buffalo, because apparently when there's a storm, cows will turn around and run away from it, which means they're in the storm for longer, and buffaloes turn around and run into it, which means they get through it faster. So it's, again, that sort of, what can you learn about leadership from other things?
Exactly. I love it.
Yeah. So one of the principles you share is don't drown battling. And leaders often tend to push when they perhaps should step aside or take that pause. And how can managers really recognise that moment when persistence becomes counterproductive? And what does going with the flow look like in a corporate context for you?
I think for me, it's again slightly about rip aspect. If you can't, you will drown battling against a rip, literally. You just exhaust yourself, and therefore in the business context, it's also that aspects of saying, okay, I'm battling this project, I'm pushing it with everybody, and everyone's pushing back, everyone's saying no, and at some point you need to go, okay, actually, I'm pushing stuff uphill here, and this is, I need to stop and pause. And as you say, that persistence, sometimes when things just, everything else is telling you, no, this is not the right time or the right place or the right project or the right product. And it's taking time to go, okay, maybe I'm wrong. And I think surfers will go, yeah, I picked the wrong body of water here. I need to move away to somewhere else. And often in business, people are afraid to say they're wrong and they made a mistake. And I think that's what hinders some businesses, hinders some people, where you need to have a culture where people can go, actually, I got this wrong. I've made a mistake. What do we do from here? And you gain people's trust, where you actually go, okay, I know I'm the leader of this area, but actually I need other people's input here. What could we be doing differently? And that's, it's not so much necessarily going with the flow, but it's saying, okay, we need to take this in a completely different direction. Can I have other people's input? And that's where you gain their trust, you gain your staff's they feel valued in themselves, of actually you're asking for their input, and you may actually end up with solutions far better than you could have come up with yourself.
And sometimes we stick with things too long because we're invested in it. It's like we've invested all this time and all this money into it, so it feels like a waste if we stop. And
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, it's like when you've invested a lot of time getting onto this wave, but sometimes you really need to go, actually, I need to just step off this one because I think there's a far better place to be. But yeah, I've invested all that time waiting for this wave. I've invested all this money and effort with this product, but yeah, we need to step off and use our energy and funds and resources somewhere else.
mm, mm. So you write about mastering fear rather than pretending mastery, and leaders often feel they have to hide fear all the time. It's that idea of I've got to show up and put the brave face on and be the leader here. But what did Surface show you about owning fear in a way that builds credibility instead of eroding it?
I think what they show me is that aspects of owning the fear and facing up to it and talking to people about it. It could be you've suddenly developed a fear of sharks out there because of the latest news report, and talking with people. And I think in the business context, as you say, often, particularly CEOs, they can't be seen to be having a bad day, because if they're seen to be glum, and it could impact the whole business, and they know that. But also they need to have a trusted group of people they can talk to, and it could be actually in the organization where they've got some key people they can trust, and they can be more real and authentic and honest with them to say, actually, the business is going really badly. These are the issues, these are the problems. What can we do about this? And you may have a trusted group of people in your organization you can seek to for that. And again, they will appreciate your authenticity, your honesty. They may come up with some great ideas. They may actually start to thrive themselves and operate above and beyond where they thought they could go, because they go, well, actually, these are my views. And actually, then for some people in business, if they haven't got that, they need to look to say, well, who is there outside of the business? Is there other CEOs I can talk to who aren't my competitors? Other people I know, in my industry or my field who I can trust and talk to them. It's very lonely at the top, particularly at a CEO or at a senior management level, but there may be peers you've worked with in past in different companies, and being able to talk to them about what do you do in these sort of situations. That can sometimes be highly valuable.
And you're right, it is that sort of loneliness at the top. And I'm an executive coach, and I often work with CEOs for exactly that reason. They just need somebody to talk things through who's not involved in the organization and doesn't have skin in the game around, particular outcomes. And I sort of really like that concept of, they need to find somebody, whether
Yeah,
it's internal or external.
yeah.
And look, asking for help is always interesting because organizations almost have this not all organisations, obviously, but they often have this concept that asking for help is seen as weakness, or it's seen as something you shouldn't be doing. So what did you discover from the surfing world about things like interdependence, trust, and letting somebody tow you back in, for example?
I think what I found with the surface is they are always happy to ask for guidance. And yes, if they're caught in a really bad bit of situation, even a pro surfer is not afraid to put up their hand and go, "Hey, I'm in big trouble here. I know people look up to me and think I'm a fantastic surfer and I should not have these issues, but I'm in trouble. I need to tow back in." And in the business world, it's to me it translates more to the aspects of saying yes, I've got issues here, I've got problems. What can we do about this? And again, it's having the faith of other individuals and your faith in them to be able to help, to give guidance, and to learn from your mistakes. And also as a leader to create a culture where people know they can make mistakes, uh, and put up a hand and say, I need help, and they won't get blamed or berated or, have impact on their career progression. And to create that culture where the more people are prepared to say, I need help here, the more chance you'll get people make mistakes and then learning from it and gaining that guidance and then moving onwards. And also I think there's another aspect of where some individuals where they don't want to, they don't want to seem stupid, but also encourage that culture where there is no stupid question. And encourage people to say, if you're not quite following this, or you don't even understand our acronyms, stop us and make sure you really understand the conversation of what's going on, because half the other people in the room didn't understand the acronym either, and they'll be really grateful. So for leaders, it's for leaders themselves to be able to say, okay, dumb question, but why are we doing it this way? And to encourage that with their staff.
Yeah, I really love that. And it really does speak to culture, doesn't it? The idea that the culture in the surfing world is that even the most pro amazing surfer can put their hand up and go, help, I need a hand here. And
Yes.
everybody is quite okay with that. No one looks at it and says, you failed, you're obviously not a good surfer, you clearly shouldn't be at the top. Why are you winning surfing championships, for example, when you needed to get a toe back in?
Yeah.
And
in fact, it gains the other surfers' respect.
yeah, because they're I suppose role modeling, which I think is a really big aspect of we can apply to leadership here, is role modeling what it is you want your people to do.
Yes. Yeah.
That's really, really powerful. So there's a chapter on relationships, and it talks about commitment and imperfections and the inevitability of being dumped. And leaders also do get dumped, projects, restructures, stakeholders, etc. So what can leaders take from the ocean about handling endings and new beginnings without losing their confidence?
I think it is about the aspects of acknowledging, there's no one perfect job, there's no one perfect role. In the same way, there's no one perfect wave. And you may have been riding the wave of your current role for really nicely for quite some time, and suddenly your firm decides to dump you, and it wasn't your choice to step off. And I think what they can learn is that it's the natural flow of things. It's the reality of waves will peter out and stop. It's the reality of in the business world, you will do really well, and then there'll be a restructure, there'll be a change. And I think what they can learn is, it's like a wave. A wave doesn't dump you because it's personal. Your business doesn't dump you because it's personal. It feels terribly personal, but it would be perhaps delusional of any of us in business to go, I'm invaluable and they could never get rid of me. It's understanding that's part of the flow of the ocean of work. But my best thing is to get back out there, find another good wave. In fact, it might be a better wave, it might be a better beach. I think I can give my personal example, which isn't even in the book. When I was working in one business where the right thing to do was to merge two completely different businesses together. I was part of a very small merger team, and you're going, this is absolutely the right thing for business. Not sure this is the right thing for me, but we'll just keep going. And yet managed to merge myself out of a job. But my perspective was, well, I'd had a great career and worked with that business. Yet it had got to the stage where I've done everything I could really do and needed to do from what gives me great sense of satisfaction in work, and now it's going to be business as usual. The fact that it was time for me to leave wasn't my choice. I just looked at, okay, well, I'm pretty certain that in 6 months' time I'll look back and go, well, that was a silver lining, because look where I am now. And the reality truly was, I then found a role that I would not have found, because I would not have been looked around with that level of intensity. And I found a role which was a fantastic next thing to move into, far better than if I'd stayed in what was now the merged company, now business as usual. So it's that following the flow, going, this wave's going to dump me, but there's not only one great role, there's not only one great wave.
Yeah, I really like that, because when you're in the thick of it, it's often very difficult to see that there is light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. There is something on the other side of that wave. And I think one of the more difficult roles you can have is to, like you said, merge yourself out of a job, because often when we're going through a change process and we realize the change is going to have a personal impact on us, no matter how committed people are to change, sometimes it does give them the wobbles. they kind of go, actually change my mind about how awesome this change is now. I've realised that it might mean I
Yeah.
don't have a job at the end
Actually,
of it.
this merger is a bad idea. Actually, no, I
Terrible
don't
idea.
think we
Let's
should do
stop.
it.
Yeah, let's stop. Yeah, and I mean that's human nature, isn't it, to a degree? So it really is that think ahead, look to the future. There's bound to be something else come along. And I suppose it's the same when you're surfing too, isn't it? It's like, you fall off that wave and you go, okay, there's going to be another great wave coming along fairly soon.
Yeah, yeah, and in the business world, it's accepting that yeah, you can become in a comfort zone, going, this is fantastic. I love the people around me. I love the company I'm working with, and now suddenly I'm no longer needed here. But there is no reason to believe, that's it. There are going to be no waves ever again in the whole ocean. No, there'll be some fantastic ones, some even better ones. So it's accepting that reality as quickly as you can. It is tough at the time. And it's accepting the reality and getting back out there to go, okay, how do I flow again?
And I think it's also probably the wisdom to know that when you're in that situation where you're kind of maybe getting a bit desperate for a wave, sometimes a wave's going to come along that isn't that great. And you just need to sit that out and wait for the one that is going to come rather than going, oh, it's tiny, but I'll jump on it anyway.
Exactly. It's still keeping that level of discrimination. A surfer won't just grab on the next wave just because, oh, that will do. They still have that level of discrimination going, no, I'm still going to look for something which is, I will get great joy out of.
Not just the next one that comes along. Now, I love the concept of everyone's equal with a wetsuit on, and it's in hierarchical organisations that can be quite a difficult thing to achieve. But how do you think leaders can really foster that idea so they create psychological safety in environments where job titles are usually the kind of thing that people look at?
That's a fascinating question, actually. Because as you say, in a hierarchical organisation, if job titles are the thing that becomes the most important. I think if I was a leader of an organization like that in today's day and age, with the younger generations who are now in their 30s and 40s coming through with a different viewpoint on things, I'd that's interesting. I'd almost say that's almost like watching a tsunami before it happens. If I'm a leader of an organization and hierarchy and job titles is still regarded as the most important thing, I'd say that's a bit like watching the water slowly receding down the beach before a tsunami, because you're not watching your competitors. And when suddenly you will find your business will be wiped out by a tsunami because your competitors have changed that whole aspect. They have adopted less of a hierarchical system. I mean, I think for the companies I've been privileged to work for, I've had some great leaders and CEOs I've worked for, and they all instilled, not using that language, but they all instilled these aspects of everyone's equal. And I've seen CEOs who will you treat the same respect and courtesy and friendliness to the non-executive director as they do to the receptionist, to the cleaner, to the guy in the mailroom. And they choose, they create a culture where job titles become less relevant. It's more about how you act and what the behaviors and how you do it, rather than what your title is. I mean, as a very quick example, I was at one organization where there was a very senior person who always hit their targets, always achieved great results. The behaviors they showed and the way they did it was so detrimental to the psychological safety of their staff. Effectively, he was a bully. And we had a change of CEO, new cultures, new values came in, and people go, yeah, well, we've heard all this before. But in this area, they could see, well, this guy's going to keep achieving his targets, and he's got that title, he's in that role. And the CEO spent time with him, tried to go and coaching and other assistants. He wouldn't change. So he said, well, one of our values is being straight and honest and calling out when things aren't right. And sadly, he and I have decided it's time for him to part ways. And he got rid of it, brought in someone else, and the whole culture changed because everyone said, these values are fair dinkum. They really are meaning. He has let go somebody who achieved everything, but the way they achieved it was terrible. So I think that aspect of treating everybody equally. It's one of the aspects I love about Australia. It's more of an equal place than where I grew up in the UK. It's still not perfect, but but that aspect that treating individuals with the same level of courtesy, no matter what their title is, that will actually have a great impact on your business.
Yeah, I believe so too. And you're right about the younger generations coming through. I was reading an article just today about Generation Alpha, who are currently, sort of 11 to 17, and their expectations. There was a survey done with them around their expectations of what the working world was going to be like when they got there. And what they want from work is very, very different from what a lot of organisations do. They want the flat structure. They want to be able to work from home. They want to have flexibility. They want to be able to, ignore email and just, FaceTime their boss whenever they want to chat to them. So I think we'll see a very different working world as, as the younger generations start to move into leadership, which we're starting to see already. There's going to be some significant shifts in the way we do things.
Exactly. And that's the tsunami some companies won't be watching, and they'll suddenly go, well, how come all my competitors have nicked all my staff and seem to be nicking our business? Because they've just sat there running their old school methods.
And we certainly have started to see that with work from home. I mean, there's companies trying to wind that back, and there's been quite a bit of pushback, and Fair Work's actually ruled in a few cases that they can't do that. And I think that's an example of it, is that hierarchical, we need you in the office where we can see you, which, isn't practical for a lot of people.
Yes, yeah, and I think it's that it also develops that level of trust in your staff.
Mm.
If people aren't trusting that their staff aren't doing the work, then again you've done there's something in the culture, there's something in the individuals, there's perhaps something in their management style. If they could only manage people if they could see them, then those managers themselves actually need to take a look inside to go, actually, how can I manage in a way which works for everybody?
Mm. Mm. Now, one of the things that I work with leaders is flow state, which is, I love that for productivity, for mental health, and so on. And I remember reading a study it's a while ago now where they were bringing people back in the US from the army. They were coming back from Afghanistan and places like that. And so the managing soldiers who were suffering significant PTSD, and they split them up into three groups. They had a group that did nothing. They had a group that saw psychologists and got therapy, and they had another group that learned how to surf. And at the end of the
Oh,
study
wow.
period, the group who learned how to surf had better mental health outcomes than even the ones who had therapy. So I love the idea of flow as actually being a really useful thing. And one of the things I actually do recommend to clients who really want to get into flow is, if they can, find like surfing or Tai Chi or gymnastics or something that you've got to use your body completely differently and you've got to focus. But surfers find it easier to enter flow states because of the nature of what they're actually doing. But what did you learn about things like focus and presence and attention that leaders can apply even if perhaps they're not able to get out and surf? How do we apply that to business?
That's a great question. I think with that, and actually, I'd love to see that study you just told me about with the surfers. That's fantastic. Um, the thing I learned from the surfers was the attention they give when they are surfing really busts the myth that multitasking equals high productivity. And I can see this as a direct correlation into the corporate world, where yes, everybody has lots of tasks to do at any one time, but the surfer, when they're out there, when they're on a wave and they're really in the zone, they are 100% focused on just that wave and just what they're doing there. They're not thinking about the grocery list. They're not thinking about, oh, I've got to fix this on the car and I need to organize this for Christmas. They need to have 100% attention to get the best out of that wave, and they're really in the zone, and it's almost intuitive and it flows and it's beautiful. And the way I bring that back into even for myself in corporate world is, there's everyone says, well, multitasking, you have to do it because there's so many things, but actually it's a case of saying, well, to my mind, there's a big difference between I've got multiple tasks need doing compared to I'm trying to do multiple tasks all at the same time. And the practical aspect that's really driven home for me on that one is I might be in the middle of typing an email and the phone goes, and I have a choice at that moment. I can pick up a phone and keep typing the email and chat on the call, and I'm multitasking, and I'm being highly productive because I'm getting two things done, which for a guy is really hard. But the reality is I'm not 100% focused on the conversation, and I'm not 100% focused on the email. So the choice I have is to go, okay, I'll take a second to go, okay, I'll stop on the email. I'll drop that annoyance. It's just arisen of who's interrupting me now. I'll pick up the phone and I will now give whoever it is 100% attention, listen to what exactly they're talking about, because in doing that, a couple of things happen. One, I hear the words of what they're saying. Secondly, I hear the tone of what they're saying. And then with that, I will often hear what they're not saying. And what's between the lines of what they're saying, what's the real need here that in the situation the person's phoned up about. And by giving it 100% of my attention, there is a better chance that the right solution will come into my mind, or I'll be able to go, oh, actually, you've just said it, but actually, is what you're really saying this? And it helps to draw it out. And you will find, or I personally found, I can solve that situation and that issue much better with a better solution. Sometimes it pops in my brain, but if I'd been typing the email, I wouldn't have noticed that thought coming in. And then I can hang up, wait a second, and then go back to my email 100%. So, as I say, it's blasted out that myth that multitasking is highly productive. Multitasking can be productive. It may not be the best productivity you want from your work people. So it's giving 100% attention at every single thing you're doing at one time. And also sometimes acknowledging I've got all these tasks, I need to prioritize. Also, I need to agree with my boss. Here's 18 things I should be working on, but these are the 3 I'm going to focus on this week. Are you happy with that? If they are, that's great. And if not, they might go, I agree with those 2, but actually, you said the 3rd one, could use that one. And then it takes away all that pressure of all these other things I know I should be doing, because even my bosses agree, well, we've only got the week, and those are the most important things. And now I can be productive because I'm not worrying about, I'm not working on item 17.
I really like that. I actually, what I do with clients who say to me that swear to me they're really good at multitasking, is I'll ask them, if you say you're driving down the street looking for an address you haven't been to before and your GPS is a bit off and you start looking for house numbers, do you turn the radio down? And almost everybody does.
Yeah.
They just turn the radio down because their brain consciously knows that it can't actually look for the house number and listen to the radio at the same time. And when I asked people that, I actually did in a workshop just the other day, I said, how many of you turn the radio down when you're looking for an address? And everyone put their hand up. And it's like, well, that's your brain flagging to you that you can't actually multitask.
Yes, exactly.
We've all done that.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah. So you described the idea of, turning up every day, which surfers often do. They turn up every day, even when it's not, convenient to them. They might be feeling sick, might be having an off day, rather than only chasing waves when it's convenient. So it's a discipline thing, but it's also a meaning thing. So what do you think shifts for leaders when they start to treat their daily habits as an investment, not something that's an obligation?
I think it's that aspect of consistency, but also having a really clear sense of purpose. I think is probably one of the most important things for leaders, and for those leaders to then also ensure their company has that as well. And from that, again, from my own past experience, there was one leader I had where it changed the whole company purpose, and it changed from being a mission statement that was a paragraph long and lots of words and just something was on the wall, but that's got to have one. And it changed to just it was one sentence about 15 words or less, but it actually encompassed the real purpose of the whole organization that every single person could cut into, whether they were an engineer, accounts payable clerk, payroll, sales, marketing, anything. And it was that sense of purpose that helped people drive through, okay, I'm having a really mundane day today. This is not necessarily following my passion. My passion in life is something else, but my underlying purpose, for this organization, my underlying purpose for myself, if I know what that purpose is, that's what gets me through the mundane days, were days when I'm doing reports, when you're going, okay, here's another day, my month just disappeared. But the overall purpose for why I'm here and what I'm doing and what this builds to helps me get through that. And I think if they can be, the leader instills that in themselves and role models that, and helps to their staff to also instill it as well, that will go a long way for helping people through the crap days and the mundane bits of their job.
Yeah. Now, when surfers tend to sort of be very embodied, very much in their body. They talk about sensing, feeling, they feel the waves and so on. And leadership often gets very cognitive, and we sort of tend to, I see a lot of leaders drop away from that, and it's all very much what's going on in their head rather than what's going on in their body. And did your interviews uncover anything or any tips about how can we tap in more into that sort of intuition, our more embodied state, and how useful that would be for leaders?
I think the aspect of that is that it's that intuitive aspect of surfers. They get to a stage where they are so practiced in what they do that on the board they just intuitively know which, just how to adjust or the feel of a wave and I think with that it's almost they're going with their gut feel to a degree. And I think for people, for those of us in the corporate world, it's unlearning ignoring gut feels. As you say, we can get very much caught up in our head. My background was accounting and audit and finance, and therefore spreadsheets and clear things you can make clear conclusions on, facts rather than thinking, or facts and thinking rather than feeling. But sometimes I think in business it's also important to go, if you've got a gut feel that this is absolutely right, or even more so, if you've got a gut feel there's something not quite right, it's not ignoring that gut feel. It's also not just giving my gut feel is this is a bad idea, so we won't do it. It's a case of saying, well, I've got a gut feel here, therefore I think what that's telling me is I don't have enough evidence on which to base a decision. I need to work through, of all these facts and data and everything I've got, what's missing that over here will actually help me to then cognitively go, actually, yeah, this is a good or a bad idea. My gut feel is telling me I don't have enough to actually make a decision yet properly. If I make a decision based on what I've got got a feeling it's going to be a bad decision. So what's missing? And I think it's acknowledging that and having faith in oneself that it doesn't sound very cognitive business wise, but having the faith of, no, okay, I shouldn't just ignore this. I should look a bit further before I decide on something.
Hmm. Yeah, because that's often what it is the gut feel is just alerting us to the fact there's something maybe something missing or something not quite there, something not quite right in our environment. I mean, that's what intuition's all about, is safety in a lot of ways. It's noticing there's something not 100%, in alignment perhaps, and it's tapping into that and going, what is it? What does this mean? Like, it doesn't mean we don't do this. It means we need to find out more before we decide.
Exactly. And it could be that nagging feeling, but you then find more evidence, which now makes you absolutely convinced this is the right thing to do. And now you don't have that nagging feeling that there's something wrong. And your energy and how you present that to your team and your staff, everything else will also have been changed. And everyone will subconsciously, they won't, consciously they won't notice it, but subconsciously they'll pick up, yep, we're really bought into this. And there's nothing to be afraid of in what this new product or business or direction we're taking is.
Mm, mm. Now, in leadership, we do see leaders who are just sort of surviving their role. They're not thriving in it. They haven't got any joy in it. And I certainly took from the book the idea that surfers obviously ride the very fine line between survival and joy. 1 minute it can be absolutely amazing, the next minute they can dumped on their head, and it can happen just in a split second. So, what lessons are there for leadership in really like staying afloat versus really riding a wave and getting joy out of it?
I think for me, it comes to that aspect of that consistency of turning up every day, that consistency of going, of almost just reminding oneself sometimes of, for a surfer, sometimes I go, actually, I turn up every single day, but I'm not convinced I want to be a surfer anymore. And sometimes it's worthwhile pausing. Sometimes it's worthwhile saying, actually, maybe I need a holiday for 3 weeks to cut off from all of this. If I'm running a business so that things will fall apart when I'm not here, then that's something else I need to look at. But the reality is, most people should be able to go away for 2 or 3 week holiday and have a sufficient team and people around who will keep, things will keep operating. Australia closes down for 2 weeks over Christmas, things keep operating. But actually to take that 3 week holiday and say, it's like taking a pause from, I'm not going to go surfing for 3 weeks. And then suddenly remembering, actually, I did really enjoy it. And again, a 3 week holiday may be enough to reset the mind, recharge, our own inner batteries, to go, actually, yeah, I do have the energy for this again. And actually, there are aspects of my work I really, really enjoy. There's one coach, I've seen who he's coached in the sporting world, and he coached him in the corporate world. And he had a lovely example that, rugby or soccer or cricket team, they all work really, really hard, and then they have a game, and then next 2 days they have recovery. Whereas in business, in the corporate world, we are so good at achieving this deadline and jumping onto the next deadline, and we never give ourselves recovery time. And maybe it's just a long weekend. Maybe it's a long, 3 days or 4 days with the emails turned off, or maybe it's a couple of weeks. But in doing that, it will help to give a chance for that joy to come back in, or a chance to work out, well, what's missing? What am I doing wrong with how I'm doing things? What can I change with how I do things so that actually I'll start to thrive again, rather than just be on survival mode?
And I think we see that in a lot of industries. I mean, you see it in Hollywood, for example, where an actor will work for, 2 years straight on an amazing movie, and then they take 6 months off and go and hang out on their ranch in Colorado somewhere.
Yeah.
They know that you need to have that downtime to decompress and to recover before you launch into the next big project. They don't sort of do back to back to back movies, unless I think Tom Cruise probably does, because he puts out all the
Maybe.
movies. So maybe he does, but most actors, you sort of hear about them disappearing.
Yeah, maybe he's got a twin. Maybe that's what
Yeah.
it is.
One who runs really fast, because he runs
Yeah.
in. Yeah, but you do hear about, most industries other than business seem to know that. They
Yeah.
know that once you've hit a really big deadline, you've done something really huge, you do need to decompress. So I think there's a lot in that for leaders. We really need to think more about how we do this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's giving yourself time to decompress and just be away from everything. Even if it's a short period of time or a long, a couple of weeks or just a couple of days, might be enough just to reset for a moment.
Mm, mm. So in the conversations you had with surfers, was there any particular surfer, or maybe it wasn't one, but it could have been a combination, who really, when you look at it, go, that's the blueprint for modern leadership, that's what we should be doing? And what really stood out for you in that?
Um, I think with that, it's probably that double aspect of, if you're caught in a rip, pause and don't panic.
Mhm.
And the other aspects of, what's your focus on, what's your purpose? For the surfers, their purpose for going down there is to find the best wave, and it's a thing that, it's not, it's picking that difference between what's your passion in life compared to what's your purpose. Because when people say follow your passion, that can be really quite hard. If my passion was photography, thankfully my parents managed to convince me there's an awful lot of exceptionally good, very poor photographers. And then there's a lot of people who are pretty reasonable in business who can afford the nice equipment and do it as a hobby. So for me, it's like the surfers follow their purpose, which is why they're there. And if you've got a real clear understanding of your own purpose in life, you can take that into any business and any industry. And for me, part of my personal purpose is I just enjoy making a difference for other people. And therefore, in any company I'm in or any industry I'm in, that can be as simple as just seeing, someone struggling with their part of the business or their part of the work. But what can I do? But, from decades of my knowledge, is there a small bit of, assistance I can provide to make a difference for them? So that's not following my passion, it's following my purpose. And then that aspect of inner rip, stop and don't panic, is, I think, such a useful thing for business, where people can see, sales are suddenly taking a dip, and, or this has suddenly gone there. And often there can be a knee-jerk reaction of, I think it's because of this, so we'll adjust that. Rather than going, actually, hang on a minute. It's almost back to the Six Sigma and Lean and all the other bits of the 5 whys. Why is this going wrong? Why is this not working? Let's just take this slowly before we adjust the 2 levers, which we actually didn't realize were working really well. And it was this other issue over here, which either was going to go away or we need to look at. But if we don't panic and we pause, and it's like in the rip, you sometimes need to go, I'll just need to tread water just for a short while and work out, yes, I need to change direction, and this is the direction I need to go. Rather than, I'm in a rip, I need to change direction. But not focusing on, is that the right direction to be changing? So it's that aspect of, sometimes in business, a knee-jerk reaction to solve one problem creates another problem, and it doesn't deal with what was actually the underlying issues and problems arising, but nobody looked at because they didn't take the time.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a great philosophy, the idea of thinking of it like being in a rip and just relax, go with the flow for a minute, catch your breath, figure out what's really going on, and then make the right move rather than panicking and battling like crazy against the rip.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
You know, or you go, I need to change direction. I'm going this direction. I'm now swimming onto the rocks. Excellent. That was a
yeah,
bad choice. You know,
yeah,
I
exactly.
changed direction. I just changed into the wrong direction.
Yeah. And I think for most listeners who are Australian, we all understand rips. It's something we've all been brought up with. You know, as soon as you start to swim in the ocean, you get told about them and you get shown how to recognize them. But for people who haven't had that experience, you know, being caught in a rip can be absolutely terrifying. It overrides all of your common sense because all you're doing is panicking and going, I'm being swept out to sea. I've got to get out of this as quickly as I can. And lots of people turn around and swim straight towards the shore, which is just swimming against the current.
Yeah,
And
yeah, and it's also that mind of, I don't understand what's going wrong, because I grew up in the UK and we were taught in the UK, when you went to the beach, swim in the calmest bit because it's safer there. Because, you know, yeah, every English beach has a rip, but it tootles along. You'd never called it a rip, you didn't know. But therefore, people will come to some things with a view of, well, I thought I was doing the right thing, and I don't understand why this is going wrong. And as you say, foreigners will get caught in a rip, and they don't understand what's going wrong. They think, I'm in the calmest bit, I'll just go back because I don't want to go over there. There's big waves. But it's misunderstanding what's going on, and it's a case of saying, well, yeah, just relax and think about, look at things differently, to think, well, what are my options?
Yeah, we were always taught to, just relax, float with it for a bit, and then swim, cross the current rather than trying to swim against it. And even sort of angle yourself so you're going with the current, but swimming towards the outside of it.
Yeah,
But
you'll get there quicker. Yeah,
you
perfect.
will, yeah. And I think that there's a lot in that about, making sure that we're taking pause as leaders, figuring out which way to go and stop fighting the wrong battle, because it happens so much, doesn't it? You're fighting the wrong battle.
Yeah, and then another great hint I picked up from a couple of wonderful leaders I worked for was that pausing on a regular basis. I had one senior leader who, on a weekly basis, for 2 hours, he would disappear from his desk and he'd leave the office, just once a week. And his secretary knew that was his thinking time, and no calls, no meetings, and nothing would interrupt him. She wouldn't go and find him, because once a week he just took a couple of hours to pause and reflect on what was going on in the business. And he said he just found that invaluable because it gave the opportunity for thoughts to come up into his mind, but otherwise, he wouldn't have seen. And he knew how much, as soon as he's back in the office, then it's just constant of demands and everything else from people. But he took that pause when he wasn't even in a rip. He was just in the general just onslaught of the tides going in and out. But he still paused on a weekly basis, on a regular basis.
Mm. So you spend a lot of time with surfers and absorbing I suppose, their culture and the way that they do things. What did you find out that you wish more leaders actually understood?
Their level of trust in each other, and their I mean, a lot of leaders do understand this. They do understand the power of collaboration, the power of trusting your team. But the surfers, they have that level of trust. If they're out there and they're whizzing along the wave, they trust that the other surfers will also move out of the way and are not going to crash into them. And they know to keep out of the way of other people and not get in their way. And sometimes leaders, they at times may not quite trust their team and may actually end up getting in the way, rather than saying, actually, I've built a great team around me, a great group of people, hopefully who are in their role, what they're doing individually better than I would be in that role, and I will trust them to do the right thing and give them the leeway to do what they think's right. And that level of collaboration, trust, and authenticity. I think it's that other aspect that all the surfers, they're all pretty authentic people. They have that sense about, I don't care if you're a millionaire or a tradie or you're on Centrelink, you're an individual, and we'll just chat, and there's no BS in our conversations. They are just authentic people enjoying what they're doing. They got a shared purpose and a shared joy of being in the ocean. And hopefully you will build a team around you where, again, you've got a shared purpose in the values of the company, the purpose of the company, and you can enjoy each other company, let everyone operate how they should be doing, and allow that to flow.
Mm. Yeah, and if organisational life mirrored that, what behaviours do you think we'd see a lot more of, and which ones do you think we just wouldn't see anymore?
I think probably back to that earlier aspects about job titles and hierarchy, we'd see less of that. I think that aspects of the work from home aspects of the trust that people will be doing their work and be doing their roles, and they know what they need to achieve, and the trust of allowing them to do that. Does it matter if they spent 2 hours on this spreadsheet between 10 o'clock and midday, or they actually chose to do it 10 p.m. and midnight? Because that is when their brain works better. If producing the outcomes, do I need to worry about quite the hours of it, that they've done to do it? And I think there's other aspects of, we've worked from home. The other aspect of work from home, and it's the thing I think, myself as a leader, it's still grappling with, is how do we maintain the culture of an organization, if people aren't there at all during the week. And that is a massive challenge, and I'll be the first one to put up my hand and say don't think I've quite got an answer for that. But do I need to turn around and say people need to be there 4 days a week to maintain the culture, or are we better off to say actually 2 days a week? And you know what, if you've been all coming in the same 2 days, so you get to see everybody, you get those 5-minute conversations, that will maintain the culture. That means the new people coming in, who've come from different companies and don't know our culture, they will pick up and learn on it. The graduates coming in who haven't worked in the business world necessarily, they will pick up on it. But I don't need people to hear me 5 days a week just to create my culture.
Mm. And I know that surveying done sort of post-COVID indicated that most office workers were pretty happy to go into the office 2 or 3 days a week, because it's
Yeah,
the convenience factor of seeing the team, face-to-face time, team meetings, and even things like being able to go to the post office at lunchtime, that kind of thing. They're like, don't mind being in the CBD a couple of days a week, as long as I can work from home the rest. So I think it's that lovely balance of, like you said, maintaining the culture and also giving people what they need.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. This is a fabulous read. We're going to put the links to the book below the video. So wherever you're watching it, if you're on YouTube or on my blog, you'll find the links to the book, and also Robert's bio and how to get in touch with him. So thank you so much. It's such an interesting concept, isn't it? Sort of go, what can we learn from surfing and take that into the business world?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ros. It's been a delight talking to you, and good, enjoy the rest of your week.
Lovely. You too. Thank you so much.
Take care.